Walk into two identical houses, same layout, same paint color, same budget spent on the renovation. One looks like a rental flat. The other looks like it belongs in a glossy interiors magazine. The difference isn't the sofa, it isn't the lighting, it isn't even the artwork on the walls, it's the timber. And once you know what separates an expensive-looking piece of wood from a cheap-looking one, you will never walk past a table, a door, or a set of stairs the same way again. Here's the strange part. Most homeowners spend thousands on paint, tiles, and soft furnishings, and almost nothing on understanding wood. Hey, assume wood is wood. A dining table is a dining table. A staircase is a staircase. But timber is one of the few materials in your home that can either make everything around it look premium or drag the whole room down, no matter how much you spent on the rest. Today, we're going to fix that. I'm going to show you exactly which timber choices make a home look expensive, why so many homes get this wrong, and then we're going to walk through a real restoration step by step so you can see the transformation with your own eyes. By the end of this video, you'll be able to walk into any room and spot within seconds, whether the wood in it is working for the space or against it. The problem: why most homes get timber wrong. Let's start with why this happens in the first place. Most furniture and flooring sold today isn't solid wood at all. It's veneer, laminate, or MDF dressed up to look like oak or walnut. From 2 meters away, in a showroom, under bright lights, it can look convincing. But wood veneer is only a fraction of a millimeter thick, glued onto a cheaper core underneath. The moment it takes a knock, gets damp, or sits in direct sunlight for a few years, the illusion falls apart. Edges chip. The grain pattern repeats in an obvious, unnatural way. The color fades unevenly. Real, solid timber behaves completely differently. It ages. It develops what restorers call patina, a gentle darkening and softening of the surface that actually makes a piece look better with time, not worse. That's the paradox at the heart of this whole topic. Cheap Timberlook furniture is designed to look its best on day one, and it's downhill from there. Genuine timber is often the opposite. It looks its best after years of honest use, especially once it's been properly restored. There's also a psychological reason we fall for the cheap stuff. Flat pack furniture and veneered surfaces are everywhere, so our eyes have become used to that slightly too perfect, slightly too uniform look. When people see real solid oak, walnut, or ash for the first time in years, something interesting happens. They can't always explain why, but they instinctively register it as expensive, even if it's actually an old piece that cost very little to restore. Our brains are wired to notice irregularity, unique grain patterns, and subtle color variation. Real wood has all three. Manufactured wood look surfaces have none of them. So why do people replace instead of restoring? Usually one of three reasons. First, they think the damage is worse than it actually is, so they assume the piece is beyond saving. Second, they don't know restoration is an option at all because most people have never watched someone do it. Third, buying new feels easier than learning a new skill, even though restoration is often faster and dramatically cheaper. There's a fourth reason too, and it's worth naming honestly. A lot of people simply don't trust themselves. They've never picked up a chisel or a sanding block, and the idea of restoring furniture sounds like something reserved for professionals with a proper workshop. But almost every technique in this video can be done on a kitchen table, in a garage, or on a tarp in the garden using tools you can pick up cheaply from any hardware shop. The skill gap between throwing it away and restoring it properly is much smaller than people assume, and closing that gap is exactly what today's video is for. That's exactly the gap we're closing today. Inspecting the damage, what you're actually looking at. Before you can restore anything, you need to know what you're looking at. Let's go through the most common problems you'll find on tired timber furniture and how to identify each one. Cracks. These usually appear along the grain, particularly on tabletops and chair seats, and are caused by the wood expanding and contracting with changes in humidity over the years. A hairline crack is cosmetic. A crack that runs the full depth of the board or that you can slide a piece of paper into is structural and needs proper repair, not just filler on the surface. Loose joints. Give any chair or table a gentle wobble test. If you feel movement at the joints, especially where legs meet the frame, the original glue has likely dried out and failed. This is one of the most common reasons people give up on furniture, and it's also one of the easiest and cheapest problems to fix properly. Missing wood. Chips, gouges, or sections that have broken away entirely, often at corners or edges where knocks happen most. Small chips can be filled. Larger missing sections sometimes need a wood insert, called a Dutchman repair in the trade, where a matching piece of timber is shaped and glued into the gap. Water damage. Look for white or gray rings, warping, or a slightly spongy feel to the surface. Water damage is one of the trickiest issues because it can be purely cosmetic, sitting only in the finish layer, or it can have penetrated deep into the wood fibers. Press gently on the affected area. If it feels soft or gives slightly, moisture has gone deeper and you may be dealing with early rot rather than a simple surface stain. Paint damage? Old paint that's cracking, flaking, or yellowing tells you the piece was likely finished decades ago with a coating that's now failing. T. His is actually good news for a restorer because underneath tired paint you often find good structural timber that's simply been hidden. Rot. This is the one issue that genuinely can end a project if it's severe enough. Press a screwdriver gently into the suspect area. If it sinks in easily and the wood feels crumbly or fibrous rather than solid, you're dealing with rot. Small areas can be cut out and replaced. Extensive rot through a structural component, like a chair leg or a table stretcher, usually means that specific part needs full replacement rather than repair. Scratches. The most common and least serious issue on this list. Surface scratches sit only in the finish and buff out easily. Deeper scratches that catch your fingernail have gone into the wood itself and need light sanding before refinishing. Broken legs. Check for hairline fractures near the top of the leg, where it meets the seat or frame, as this is the highest stress point on almost any piece of furniture. A clean break can often be glued and clamped back to full strength. A splintered or crushed break usually needs reinforcement, sometimes with a hidden dowel running through the repair. Loose glue joints, slightly different from loose joints in general. This specifically means the old animal hide glue, or PVA, has crystallized and turned brittle, often visible as a dusty residue around the joint. It needs to be fully removed before new glue will bond properly, because gluing over old glue almost never holds. Once you've gone through this checklist, you'll have a clear picture. Most pieces that look like they belong in a skip are actually suffering from 2 or 3 of these issues at most, and every single one on this list is fixable with the right process. It's worth saying, too, that a proper inspection takes longer than people expect, and that's a good thing. Rushing the stage is one of the most common beginner mistakes, because it's tempting to jump straight to sanding the moment you've spotted the obvious problem. But a 5-minute inspection, going joint by joint, surface by surface, will often reveal a second or third issue hiding behind the first. A table leg with an obvious scratch might also have a hairline crack you'd have missed if you hadn't run your fingers slowly along every edge. Treat this stage like a doctor, taking a full history before treatment, not just glancing at the symptom that's easiest to see. The restoration process, step by step. This is where the transformation actually happens. Let's walk through it, in order. Step 1, cleaning. Before touching sandpaper or chemicals, wipe the entire piece down with a mild solution of warm water and a small amount of dish soap, using a soft cloth. This removes decades of dust, grease, and household grime that would otherwise clog your sandpaper and interfere with any stripper you use later. Let it dry completely, ideally overnight, before moving on. Step 2, removing the old finish. For most furniture, a chemical stripper is your best option. Apply it with an old paintbrush, following the grain, and let it sit for the time stated on the tin, usually 15 to 30 minutes. You'll see the old varnish or paint start to bubble and lift. Scrape it away gently with a plastic scraper, never metal, because metal can gouge the softened wood underneath. For smaller areas, or where you want more control, a heat gun on a low setting paired with a scraper works well too, though it takes more patience. A safety note here. Always work in a ventilated space, wear gloves, and if the piece is older than the 1970s, be cautious with old paint layers, as some contain lead. If you're unsure, a simple testing kit from a hardware shop will tell you in minutes. Step 3, sanding. Start with a coarser grit, around 80 to 100, to remove any remaining finish and level out rough patches. Then move progressively finer to 120, then 180, then finishing at 220 grit for a silky smooth surface. Always sand with the grain, never cross it, because sanding against the grain leaves scratches that become obvious once you apply stain. For flat surfaces like tabletops, a random orbital sander speeds things up enormously. For legs, curves, and detailed carving, hand sanding with a sanding sponge gives you the control you need. Step 4, repairing cracks. For narrow cracks, wood glue worked in with a flexible palette knife, then clamped overnight, is often enough. For wider cracks, mix the glue with fine sawdust from the same piece to create a color-matched filler paste. This is a trick many professionals use, because sawdust from the actual piece will always match better than any shop-bought filler. Step 5, filling gaps. For small chips and holes, a 2-part epoxy wood filler is generally superior to standard wood filler because it's harder, more durable, and bonds more permanently. Standard wood filler is fine for very minor cosmetic gaps that won't take much wear, but for anything on a working surface, corner, or edge, epoxy is worth the extra cost. Step 6, re-gluing joints. This is where that wobble test from earlier pays off. Carefully separate the loose joint, if possible, and scrape away every trace of the old, failed glue using a small chisel or wire brush. Apply fresh PVA wood glue to both surfaces, reassemble, and clamp firmly. Wipe away any glue that squeezes out immediately with a damp cloth, because dried glue squeeze out will block stain from penetrating evenly later. Leave clamped for a full 24 hours before handling the piece again. Step 7. Replacing damaged wood. For rot or missing sections too large to fill, cut out the damaged area cleanly using a small saw, then shape a replacement block from matching timber. Glue it into place, clamp, and once fully dried, sand it flush with the surrounding surface. This is the most advanced step in the process, but it's also the one that separates a good restoration from a great one because it's invisible once finished. Step 8. Staining. Apply wood stain with a clean cloth or brush, working in the direction of the grain, then wipe away the excess after a few minutes for an even tone. Always test your stain on an offcut or a hidden area first, because the same stain can look dramatically different on different species of wood. Oak, for example, drinks up stain unevenly unless you use a pre-stain conditioner first. Step 9. Sealing. Once the stain is fully dry, usually 24 hours, apply a sealer to lock in the color and protect the wood underneath your final finish. This step is often skipped by beginners, and it's the reason their finish sometimes looks patchy or uneven. Step 10. Final polish. Finish with either an oil-based finish, a wax, or varnish, depending on how the piece will be used. Apply thin, even coats, sanding lightly between each with very fine 320 grit paper, and buff the final coat to the sheen level you want, whether that's a soft satin or a deeper gloss. A quick word on common mistakes. The two biggest ones I see are rushing the drying time between coats, which traps moisture and causes cloudiness, and skipping the test on an offcut step, which leads to unpleasant surprises on the actual piece. Patience is genuinely the most underrated tool in restoration.